Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Americas. I'm Jeannie Godula. Coming up, a town that was once under the spotlight for cracking down on its Latino immigrants has now seen that population spike more than 800% in 15 years. Our look at the changing face of Trump's America on the way. Then, deforestation of the Amazon in Brazil has hit its highest rate in a decade. Trees in an area 5 times the size of London wiped away. And the second leg of the all-Argentine Copa Libertadores final will be played outside of Argentina, a match postponed twice already due to fan violence. We'll start first in the U.S., in the small coal mining town of Hazleton, Pennsylvania. The almost all-white town was in a steep economic decline, with jobs dwindling and solid income scarce. But now Hazleton seems to be on the rebound, but it's also become 50% Latino. It's a story that's becoming more and more common across America as small towns face a choice between preserving their identity and saving their economy.
Hazleton, Pennsylvania is home to 25,000 people. Once a majority white mining town, inter-ethnic resentment is on the rise. Over the course of just 15 years, Hispanics have become the majority ethnic group here, up from 5% to 52% of the town's population. Bob and Tom were born and raised in Hazleton. They say they no longer recognize the streets they grew up in.
It's just not our town. No. We don't know anybody. We don't know anybody in these stores. We don't know who they are.
They're particularly perturbed by how much Spanish they hear and see.
Somebody mentioned that they wanted to change the name of Wyoming Street.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
In what?
To some Spanish name.
We used to joke about being a minority in this little town. It's no joke anymore.
There is still one place that feels like home for some white residents, the Hazleton Museum. Bob and his mum are nostalgic for an America of diners and European, that is to say white, immigration. Joan believes Italians and Poles wanted to assimilate, unlike Latinos.
They go to their own grocery stores. They go to their own churches.
Yep.
They don't go to the white place.
Yeah.
In the 1970s, the town's coal mines gradually closed. Many left to find jobs elsewhere. As the economy got back on track after the 2008 financial crisis, industry returned to Hazleton, and in turn, demand for cheap labor. Latinos embraced the opportunity. In Hazleton, the vast majority of Hispanic immigrants are in work, despite some who say migrants are in the US to play the system.
The percentage of the workforce is about 75 to 80% Latino.
Francisco Torres is half Irish, half Mexican. He takes us to meet Leticia Gutierrez, one of the first Hispanics to arrive in Hazleton 28 years ago.
We also pay our taxes, and that means we're supporting Americans who aren't working.
The US government predicts that by 2044, in less than 30 years' time, the majority of Americans will be non-white. The demographics of towns and cities across the US are changing. The case of Hazleton may soon become the norm.
Let's take a look now at the other big stories out of the U.S. this week. Donald Trump has one more staunch supporter in the Senate. That's Mississippi Republican Cindy Hyde-Smith, who won her battle against Democratic rival Mike Espy in the last campaign of the contentious midterm elections. Hyde-Smith was slammed over racially insensitive remarks, but she still prevailed in the southern conservative state. Her win bumps up the Republican majority in the Senate 53 to 47. That comes as President Trump said this week he doesn't believe his own government's report on global warming. That says there could be massive economic losses in the U.S. if carbon emissions continue to feed climate change unchecked. Trump said he had read some of the report and that it was, quote, fine, but as for the biggest warning that says there will be hundreds of billions of dollars in losses by the end of the century if climate change is unchecked, the president simply said, I don't believe it. And U.S. Auto Group General Motors says it will close 5 plants and cut 14,000 jobs in North America. It's the first big step in the century-old GM's transformation. The company is reinvesting money away from regular cars and putting it into technology it believes will power its future, like self-driving electric vehicles. Donald Trump wasn't happy about the job cuts, though, tweeting that the White House was now looking at cutting all subsidies to GM, including for electric cars. Well, our number of the week is this one, 1 million. Environment group Greenpeace says deforestation in Brazil has reached such epic proportions that an area equivalent to 1 million football fields was lost in just 1 year. Now, that's 14% more than the year before. France 24's Olivia Salazar-Winspear has been looking at that devastating number. She joins me now on the set to talk a bit more about this. Olivia, what does this new data mean in terms of the environmental challenges Brazil is facing already?
Now, just thinking about the size of this space you just described, it's been called 5 times the size of London or Sao Paulo, and if only we were talking about an urban area. We're not. We're talking about the most precious resource that the world has, which is the Amazon rainforest, 60% of which is found in Brazil, and often described as the lungs of the planet, the best defense we have against carbon emissions. Now, a lot of people are asking themselves the question, how and why was this allowed to happen? Authorities in Brazil have responded saying this is down to illegal activity, things like arms, human trafficking, money laundering. But other experts say that since Brazil has environmental laws against illegal mining or logging, that since 2016 and the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff and the political instability that followed that, those laws really haven't been enforced as rigorously as they should have been.
Now, how do you see this issue being dealt with as Brazil is now heading into this new political chapter? Its new president-elect, Jair Bolsonaro, a very hardline conservative, is taking office next year.
Well, obviously, environmentalists are very alarmed, especially because there's going to be at least one climate change denier in the incoming cabinet in the form of the new foreign minister. As for Bolsonaro himself, as a congressman, he has consistently voted against any measures which protect indigenous lands in the Amazon and indigenous people's access to that land. He said that previous governments and NGOs, bodies have promoted indigenous rights over the rights of farmers, ranchers and agribusiness, and that has harmed Brazil's economy. The major red flag, however, was when just after he was elected, he announced that he wanted to merge 2 ministries, the Agriculture Ministry and the Environmental Ministry. It was justified as a kind of slimming down operation so that Brazil would have perhaps a smaller government. And he said that if we didn't have 2 conflictual figures in these 2 different ministries, things would perhaps get done quicker. They would be able to take action more effectively. But this was seen as a hugely controversial move simply because these 2 ministries have quite conflicting interests. And just one thing that illustrates that, recently Brazil has become the largest exporter of soy to China. Brazil surpassed the US, and they're selling record amounts of that crop to Beijing. At the same time, that's been in line with deforestation, the sort of figures that we're talking about. So many experts make a link between those 2 trends. That move to merge the 2 ministries was seen as so controversial, both nationally and internationally, that Bolsonaro backtracked on that. Those ministries will stay separate. But in terms of his loyalties in Brazilian politics, what brought him to power, if you like, there's a movement that people talk about, the BBB parliamentary group. That's a Boi, Bala e Bíblia. So you've got bullets, the Bible and cattle. And the cattle lobby, of course, which we're talking about here, agro-business, they've been very loyal to him politically and financially. They will probably be expecting something in return in terms of friendly policies. So that's the national situation. Internationally, Brazil is a signatory of the Paris Climate Accord. Bolsonaro has said he'll pull the country out. Then he said he'd keep them in. We'll have to see what happens in January about that.
Olivia, thank you so much for that. Olivia Salazar-Winspear. Next now, the all-Argentine final of the Copa Libertadores, postponed twice last weekend after fan violence, is now due to be played next month, but this time outside Argentina. The South American Soccer Confederation says the postponed second leg would be held either December 8th or 9th at a site still yet to be determined.
A game gone wrong. Last weekend's final of the Copa Libertadores between River Plate and Boca Juniors was postponed following violence outside the Monumental Stadium in Buenos Aires. On Tuesday, the president of the South American Football Federation announced plans to reorganize the game, but not without some caution.
Firstly, the game will be played. If played, let me be clear, on Saturday, December 8th or Sunday, December 9th, and it will be played outside of Argentina.
Several Boca players were injured by rival supporters who threw stones at their bus. Then, after the stadium was evacuated, some chose to confront security forces. River Plate and Boca Juniors have passionate supporters, and the rivalry between them is strong. When they meet, it often ends in violence. On Monday, the security minister for the Argentine capital resigned in response to the incident. Buenos Aires is set to host the G20 summit this weekend, and some residents doubt whether the government can keep the city safe.
People are angry, and they want to do the G20 here. What do they want to prove? On Saturday, they couldn't even control a football match.
For others, last Saturday's violence was just an isolated incident and not a cause for concern this weekend.
Football is polluting everything. It's a business that apparently gives very good profits, but it's causing great damage to society. But I do not think that influences the security of the G20. That's another thing.
The summit is to take place over 2 days, on Friday and Saturday, when the city will welcome the leaders of the world's 20 richest nations.
Well, believe it or not, Christmas is coming. Now that Thanksgiving's out of the way, holiday cheer has popped up across the U.S., including at the White House. But the crimson Christmas trees chosen by First Lady Melania Trump have already provoked quite a bit of reaction on Twitter. This user said, "Is it just me, or do the White House decorations look like a car wash?" And this one made a striking parallel with the enslaved red-dressed women in the hit TV show The Handmaid's Tale. Now, while much of the jokes were surely prompted by dislike of Donald Trump, psychology experts do say too much red may just be, well, a bit too much for the human psyche to take. I knew there was a reason green's mixed in there at the holidays. All right, we'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for watching this Inside the Americas. We'll see you again next time for all the news from north to south.
From North to South Africa, from Bamako to Nairobi, from Accra to Mogadishu. Bringing you all the political, economic, cultural and social news from Africa for a better insight into an ever-changing continent.
Across Africa, presented by Georgia Calvin-Smith on France 24 and France24.com.